episode of Garmology, Fun with Outerwear. I'm Nick Johannesson, host of Garmology podcast and also writer of welldressed.com blog. Now, today's piece of outerwear is this one. You might recognise it. It's the Grenfell Shooter, kind of a classic piece in British country outerwear. They have been making it, I think, since the 1960s, and it's made of the Grenfell cloth. Now, two brands involved here. Grenfell have been going since 1930s, I think, so about 80 years in business now. London factory, very much high quality outerwear, and of course the Grenfell cloth made for expedition use, gabardine fabric, said not to be using any water repellents. Now, the other company I mentioned, Cordings of Piccadilly, been going since 1839, so coming up from, well, just past 180 years in business. Now, it's worth thinking back a bit. 1839. Imagine when they started, their customers would have been arriving on horseback in the middle of London. And then you visit the middle of London today, wow. And of course, after 60 odd years in business, people started arriving in motor cars. It's weird to think about. Also, Cordings of Piccadilly, they're right next to Piccadilly Circus, and if you are in London, it is definitely worth visiting the shop. Nip in through the door, down into the basement, and it's an absolute heaven of corduroy, tweed and waxed cotton. Brilliant place. Now, so this is the Grenfell Shooter, which has been commissioned by Cordings, so you can buy it through Cordings, but made in the Grenfell factory in East London, which is in fact not the old Grenfell factory but a new purpose-built one, and the Grenfell name has been changed 3 times now, but it's kind of a continuous history, and they still have the old archives of all the old pieces made and so forth. So Grenfell today is pretty much Grenfell as it was. Get back to that in a little bit. Now, the Shooter, not a very sort of complicated high-tech jacket at all, really. What you really notice is the belt. The belted style I find works better for the slimmer person, so the belt actually has a sort of cinching effect. It doesn't look so good if you're feeling a bit Colonel Blimp, where it might not look too good. Trench coats have the same problem. You need to be a bit slimmer figure. So let's have a look. Belt, very nicely made, leather round the buckle. Got 2 big bellows pockets here. It's putting cartridges and lunch, whatever, in them, I think. I'm not a shooter myself, so I don't really use it for that purpose. It's got buttons, but there's no zip, so it's a fairly simple jacket to use. Not much can go wrong here. But if we undo the belt and undo the buttons are very, very nice horn buttons, polished, really lovely. You've got 2 bellows pockets, got the chest pocket, you've got strengthenings on the shoulders, presumably for the gun. You've got really nice elasticated cuffs here with a little brass press button, and that's kind of it on the outside. And there's not much more on the inside, really. We've got the big game pockets here, similar to the ones on the Barber border. You can button them out to clean them, wash them, and then you've got an inside pocket here, and that is kind of it. You put it outside a tweed jacket, wool jumper, whatever, and off you go. I have to admit, when I first bought this, it took a little while to get used to it, but now I find myself picking it off the rack frequently because it just feels really good. Now, Grenfell cloth. I mentioned it was made for expedition purposes, and it has quite a illustrious history, and we can see on the label, Grenfell cloth made in England. Now, today's Grenfell sort of kind of want you to think that it's still British-made Grenfell cloth, but I don't think it actually is. They have admitted to me as much that it's not made in the UK. Other sources tell me it's made in South Korea, which is probably a good thing because they make really fine cloth in South Korea. It's like Ventile though. It's a bit disingenuous in that Ventile hasn't actually been made in the UK for over 20 years, though the advertising, the website, etc. sort of really wanted to make you think it was. Not that it was made in Switzerland and that the name was just put on there, eater-proof fabric. I don't know, I mean, do you care about sort of things like this, about being truthful with the heritage and advertising correctly? For me, it is part of what's important. If it's made in the original factory, not by the original people probably, if it's been in business for 200 years, I'll give you that, but that it's made properly and everything is truthful and that the fabric is right and everything, because after all, these jackets do cost a bit. This is a £600 jacket, which I think is a fair price really, for something that's made properly in England. Now, made properly, Grenfell do have the most excellent quality on what they do. Every stitch here is perfect. There's no loose buttons, there's no wonky stitching. It's just so properly made. Their quality control must be immense. But that's kind of what they've been doing forever. And if you look at their website today and look at the coats they're making now, some absolutely gorgeous coats. At a price, of course. I mean, you're paying good money for proper product. The odd thing about the Grenfell Shooters though, now £600, you'd think, oh, maybe I can get one from 30-40 years ago, get a vintage one, that would be nice and cheap. The weird thing is that the vintage ones actually cost more than the brand new ones. I've seen them £700-800 for a vintage one. I mean, not even perfect, but sort of pretty worn out. Not even worn out, but sort of well worn, which is weird, because if you think you might have bought one of those in 1960s, so 60 years later, well, I mean, it's increased massively in value. How often do you find a jacket that is actually genuinely an investment piece? That's pretty rare. Only though, if you're interested in vintage Grenfell, there are other options that are cheaper. Now, take this one. Granted, it's not the Shooter. It's not that dissimilar though. It's kind of a mix between a Barbara and a Grenfell Shooter, I suppose. It's got similar bellows pockets. It's made from Grenfell cloth, made in England. It's green, okay. This one was properly vintage, so I had to repair the cuffs. I repurposed some vintage army tent for that. Repaired a bit along the bottom here. Repaired some stitching around the pockets and so forth. But it's actually quite a tidy coat. What did that cost me? I think I paid £15 for it on eBay. So that was the reasonably priced option, and it's for the use you put it to. It's pretty good. It even has a sort of rubber backing to the Grenfell cloth, so it would be nice and waterproof. So there you go. The Grenfell Shooter, available through Cordings. I actually like it a lot. So I'll drop some links in the comments and let me know what you think. Bye bye for now. See you next week. Oh, I almost forgot. You probably wanted to see it on as well. So there we go. The Grenfell Shooter, and I've put the vintage Grenfell on the dummy here. Now, there was one thing I forgot to mention. It does have a good collar with a storm flap. Somewhere back here, it's fastened up. Just a sec. Trying to do these things in the blind while recording. I'm pretty much doomed. There we go. So you can fasten the storm tab like that. Now, this one also has the same feature. There we go. Not as fully developed. I also noticed this one has got the provision for a hood, but it doesn't have a hood. This one doesn't have a provision for a hood, and naturally then doesn't. So there you go. Now, if you want more Garmology, remember, Garmology podcast available on all podcast apps, also via welldresseddad.com. There's about 45 episodes now of Garmology available, and there'll be a new Fun with Outerwear next week. So, bye bye for now.